Living a lie had exacted a heavy toll, a constant gnawing anxiety, but being cornered forced a truth she hadn't expected, the truth of her own resilience. Deception offered escape, but standing firm, even on shaky ground, felt like the truest act she had performed in years. This painful crack in her facade was a stark moral lesson. The cost of hiding was the perpetual fear of being found, a fear that could paralyze, or perhaps finally set her free to fight for something real. The air in the elegant, sun-drenched office felt suddenly thin and cold. Sarah, or rather the woman known as Eleanor Vance in this carefully constructed new life, sat across from the sharp-suited figure who managed the investment portfolio she had built so painstakingly. A knot tightened in her stomach. His usual confident smile was replaced by a grim, almost pitying expression. The scent of expensive leather and polished wood seemed to mock the unsettling silence that hung between them. He pushed a thick file across the gleaming desk, the sound a heavy thud that resonated like a death knell in her ears. The printed words blurred, but the numbers stood out with brutal clarity. Zeros where there should have been substantial gains, negative signs devouring her principal. It wasn't just a loss, it was devastation. Everything she had built, the financial security that represented her freedom and her future, was gone. He spoke softly, his voice devoid of its usual professional cheer. It wasn't the market, it was internal. Someone had systematically siphoned off funds, manipulated accounts, vanished with the bulk of her fortune over the past year. A deep, cold dread snaked up her spine. She knew the architect of her ruin the moment the word internal left his lips. It was Marcus Thorne, the charming, trustworthy partner she had brought into her burgeoning business venture, the man she had confided in, the one she had allowed closest in this new, guarded existence. The realization hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath, leaving a bitter, metallic taste on her tongue. It wasn't just financial ruin. It was a profound, agonizing betrayal, a mirroring of the very deceit she had woven into the fabric of her own past. The full scope of the destruction unfolded over the following days. Marcus hadn't just stolen her money. He had planted subtle, untraceable rumors among her new social circle, hints about a mysterious past, questionable origins, leveraging the very secrets she had guarded so fiercely. Her new friends, the pillars of the community she had worked so hard to integrate into, began to look at her differently. Whispers followed her into rooms. Invitations stopped arriving. The air grew heavy with unspoken judgment. She felt utterly exposed, stripped bare not just of wealth, but of the hard-won respectability she had craved. The polished veneer of Eleanor Vance cracked and shattered, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. Standing alone in the silent, echoing rooms of the large house she could no longer afford, the weight of her situation settled upon her. The scent of the wilting flowers someone had sent just days before felt like a cruel joke. This wasn't random misfortune. It felt like a cosmic ledger being balanced. The pain radiating from the gaping wound of Marcus's betrayal was sharp and immediate, yet underneath it pulsed a deeper, more resonant ache, the echoes of the pain she had inflicted on others through her own calculated deceits and betrayals in her former life. The price of her past actions was being paid now, not in the abstract, but through the very real, crushing loss of everything she had fought to create. The humiliation burned hotter than any anger. It was a bitter, undeniable lesson etched in financial statements and averted eyes. She had escaped the consequences of her old life, but the universe, it seemed, had a long memory, and karma, it turned out, was a relentless creditor. The taste of grit coated her tongue, a bitter reminder of the dust that still hung thick in the air. A heavy metallic scent, sharp and acrid, permeated the stillness, a ghost of the violence that had so recently erupted here. Silence, profound and absolute, pressed in on Maya from all sides, a suffocating blanket after the deafening roar of the climax. She stood alone in the heart of the devastation, her body screaming protests with every labored breath. Her muscles stiff and bruised. The fabric of her clothes felt rough and torn against her skin, mirroring the ragged state of her spirit. Her eyes, weary and stinging from the smoke and debris, scanned the wreckage. Piles of splintered wood, twisted metal, and unrecognizable fragments lay scattered like broken promises beneath a bruised sky. This was the landscape of her victory, etched in destruction. But there was no taste of triumph on her lips, only the persistent bitterness of ash and regret. She stumbled forward, her worn boots crunching over the detritus. Her fingers brushed against something cool and smooth amidst the rubble near what had once been a threshold. She knelt, carefully clearing away the debris with trembling hands, revealing a small, familiar object, a tarnished and bent locket, its delicate chains snapped. A sharp intake of breath hitched in her throat, a sound swallowed by the vast silence. It was his, the one she had been given years ago, a symbol of trust, now broken, lying amidst the ruins she had wrought. It represented everything lost. A wave of nausea rolled through her, not from physical exertion, but from the crushing weight of realization. The cost. It wasn't just the structures reduced to ruin, the elaborate plans turned to ash, the external forces vanquished. It was this. It was the intimate sacrifice she had been forced to make, the connection she had severed, the trust she had betrayed, the fundamental innocence she had shed, piece by painful piece, to reach this point. The price of her singular, relentless pursuit of justice felt suddenly astronomical, a crushing debt she wasn't sure her soul could ever truly repay. She clutched the broken locket, its cold metal chilling her palm, a tangible weight against the emptiness inside her. The face reflected in a jagged shard of glass nearby wasn't the Maya she had known before this brutal fight began. It was harder, her eyes haunted, etched with lines of pain and grim resolve, shadowed by the heavy knowledge of the lengths she had gone to, the irreparable things she had done. The reflection staring back was as fragmented and distorted as the world around her, a shattered image of herself. This was the chilling dawn after the storm, and the true, agonizing devastation of her choices was just beginning to sink in, cold and absolute. A forgotten wooden box, tucked away in the back of a dusty closet, emitted a faint, sweet scent when Maya pried it open. It smelled of cedar and something else, something warm and earthy that tugged at a distant corner of her mind. Inside lay faded photographs, a piece of intricately embroidered fabric, and a small, smooth stone. A wave of nausea, sharp and sudden, washed over her as the scent deepened, bringing with it the humid air of her grandmother's kitchen. The low murmur of voices speaking a language she had painstakingly tried to forget. It was here, sifting through these tangible ghosts, that the true cost of her ascent hit with brutal clarity. She had thought shedding her past was necessary baggage disposal for the journey to success. The awkward clothes, the strange food, the superstitions whispered in hushed tones, she'd seen them as hindrances in a world that valued sleek lines and sharp efficiency. She remembered the sting of laughter in a school hallway, the way her packed lunch had drawn mocking stares.
What is that smell? Gross!
The words, even years later, echoed with the same dismissive cruelty that had fueled her desperate need to erase any trace of her origins. She'd traded the shared warmth of family meals for lonely, expensive dinners, the deep, resonant rhythm of traditional music for the sterile silence of her minimalist apartment, the touch of worn, familiar hands for the cool, impersonal handshake of business partners. She had chased a hollow echo of richness, glittering surfaces, empty titles, fleeting admiration, believing it would fill the void left by what she had shed. But the void remained, a gaping chasm now filled with the biting winds of regret. She had severed the roots that fed her, leaving her standing tall but brittle, swaying precariously in the slightest breeze. The vibrant colors of her heritage, once a source of shame, now appeared in her memory with breathtaking beauty, starkly contrasting with the monochrome life she had built. The true wealth, she realized with a crushing ache, wasn't in the figures in her bank account, but in the intangible tapestry of connection, belonging, and soul she had so carelessly unraveled. A weight settled in Maya's chest, heavy and cold, whenever her thoughts drifted back to the fragmented pieces of her life before. It wasn't just the memories themselves, but the phantom limb ache of connections severed, of people left behind in the crucible that had reshaped her. Now the urge to reach out, tentative and fraught with peril, had become a persistent hum beneath her skin. She sat in the quiet stillness of her small apartment, the digital world, a glowing portal in her hands. Her fingers hovered over a name she hadn't seen typed out in years, a ghost in her contact list, preserved less by intention and more by inertia. Difficulty was a vast chasm, stretching between the then and the now. How could she bridge it? What words could possibly encompass the seismic shifts in her existence? Fear was a palpable thing, a knot tightening in her stomach. Fear of rejection, yes, but also fear of indifference. Worse, fear of discovering that the person on the other end had become a stranger, or that the person she had been was utterly unrecognizable to them. The scent of dust motes dancing in a sunbeam filtering through the window seemed to mock the freshness she had tried to cultivate within herself, reminding her of aged, forgotten things. Her thumb trembled as it edged closer to the send button. The screen felt cool beneath her touch, a stark contrast to the sudden heat blooming on her cheeks. Every beat of her heart was a drum calling out the stakes. This wasn't just sending a message. It felt like sending a fragile lifeboat across turbulent waters. She saw flashes of shared laughter, heard echoes of past conversations, felt the warmth of a hand on her shoulder. But these sensory ghosts were overlaid with the harsh reality of her journey. The grime, the tears, the hard lessons learned. The world she had left behind was not the same, she knew. Time did not stand still for the displaced. People moved on, perspective shifted, priorities realigned. And Maya? She was undeniably, irrevocably changed. The naive girl was gone, replaced by a woman forged in adversity, wary and strong, but still bearing the scars of her transformation. Could the fragile thread of a past connection bear the weight of these two altered realities meeting? The thought was a sharp intake of breath, cold and sudden. This hesitant step wasn't about seeking rescue or dwelling in nostalgia. It was about the terrifying bravery of acknowledging a history she had buried deep, about seeing if any part of it could endure the light of her current existence. The true overcoming wasn't in the response, but in the courage to initiate the attempt, accepting that the connection, like herself, would be profoundly different, perhaps even broken beyond repair. The air in the small, familiar room felt thick with the dust of forgotten memories. Sunlight filtered weakly through the grimy window pane, illuminating motes dancing in the stillness. She stood there, her hands clasped tightly, the scent of faded potpourri and old wood stinging her nostrils. This was the place where laughter had once echoed freely, now hushed by years of silence and betrayal. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She had come seeking a bridge across the gulf her own actions had created, hoping against hope that time might have softened the edges of the wound she had inflicted. Facing the figure seated rigidly across from her, the woman she had once called friend, her voice was barely a whisper.
I had to see you. I had to try and explain.
The other woman didn't move, her gaze fixed on a distant point beyond the window. There was no warmth in her eyes, only a profound, unsettling emptiness. It was the look of someone who had mourned a loss so deeply, nothing remained but scar tissue. Every nerve ending in the room seemed to hum with unspoken pain, a resonant frequency of hurt that vibrated between them. She took a tentative step forward, the floorboards creaking under her weight, a sound amplified in the tense silence.
Please, can we just talk? I know I hurt you, more than I can ever say, but I've changed. I understand now.
A muscle twitched in the other woman's jaw. A single heavy tear tracked a slow path down her cheek, catching the weak light like a cruel diamond. The air grew colder, pressing in on her, a palpable rejection. Finally, the figure across the room turned, her eyes locking onto the protagonists. They were filled not with anger, but with a chilling, resigned sorrow.
There's nothing to explain, and nothing to change. What you did, it didn't just break something between us. It broke something inside me, something that can't be put back together.
Her voice was low, steady, devoid of accusation, yet more devastating than any shout. It carried the weight of absolute truth, the crushing finality of a door closing forever. It was the sound of an irreversible consequence, settling in the quiet space between two people who could never again be who they were. The chasm was not just between them. It was a fissure running through the very foundation of their shared past. A leifong that split their world in two, impossible to mend. In that moment, she felt the true, brutal weight of her choices, a burden she would carry alone across the unbridgeable chasm. The crisp air carried the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, a fragrance miles away from the sterile, polished surfaces of her former world. Maya walked barefoot across the cool flagstones of a small patio, the rough texture grounding her in a way marble never could. The crushing weight of the past, both the suffocating opulence and the terrifying descent into vulnerability, had been broken into fragments. Now she was learning to build something new from those pieces. She had not sought to reclaim the gilded cage, nor did she linger in the shadow of the fight for justice, though its outcome had brought a quiet satisfaction. Instead, she had found a quiet corner of the world, a place where worth was measured not in digits in a bank account, but in shared smiles, helping hands, and the simple rhythm of life. Her hands, once accustomed only to signing papers and holding expensive accessories, now knew the feel of soil, the warmth of sun-baked stone, the satisfying pull of weeding a small garden. Identity, she had learned, was not a title bestowed by others or a sum accumulated, but the quiet strength found within. The lessons etched by betrayal and hardship had not broken her. They had revealed the core of who she was, stripped bare of pretense. Wealth, she now understood, was not the absence of need, but the abundance of peace. Belonging wasn't about fitting into an exclusive circle, but about finding a place where her spirit could simply be, unjudged, unmeasured by external standards. A sense of profound peace settled within her chest, a quiet understanding that the most valuable possessions were the pieces of herself she had found and healed along the way. The roar of the conflict had faded, replaced by the gentle hum of insects and the soft rustle of leaves, a symphony of ordinary existence that now sounded like perfect harmony. And so, the journey concluded, not with a triumphant roar of victory or a return to former glory, but with the quiet dignity of a spirit made whole. Maya's path illustrated a truth often obscured by the world's clamor, that true wealth lies not in what is gathered, but in what remains after everything external is stripped away. Identity is forged in the fires of adversity, revealing not who we were pretending to be, but the unbreakable core of who we truly are. The pursuit of external validation, the endless striving for more, these often lead to hollow victories. But finding peace within the scattered pieces of a broken life, that is the ultimate triumph. It is a quiet, profound understanding that the greatest belonging is the acceptance of oneself. And the most valuable treasure is the peace found in living authentically, grounded not in status, but in the simple, enduring reality of the present moment. Justice, in the end, wasn't just about righting wrongs. It was about freeing the spirit to finally find its true home among the quiet pieces of a life well lived and deeply understood.